I'm Vicky Linane and welcome to Embrace Therapy podcast. I am a practicing art therapist based in Ireland. In each episode, I will interview guests from various fields of therapy and well-being with the aim to encourage healing through embracing therapy. On the podcast this week, we have Joanne O'Dwyer. She is an art psychotherapist based in the Midlands of Ireland. Joanne works with people of all ages and abilities in a variety of settings, helping people to manage difficult feelings through the process of art making and creative expression. It's a pleasure to introduce to you Joanne O'Dwyer.
Yes, so I'm based in Athlone in private practice. So I'm Midlands. I am kind of working back into the community again, which is great. I'm getting to, go back to Brothers of Charity, which is something that I've been mad to do all through the pandemic, get back into group work as well. But my private practice is based in Athlone in the Dancing Soul Therapy Centre there in Monksland. Yeah, that's where I am most of the time.
And in that private practice, how are you finding it? Like, are you finding that you're getting more and more individuals, or has there been, I suppose, a few people coming to you looking for groups? Do you find that people want groups now, or?
Not just yet. I think people are still feeling a little bit apprehensive about the group idea. It's still a little bit but I do think we're getting there slowly but surely. I know for myself and where we're kind of based, we're kind of, starting to think about workshops again in person, and we haven't actually done any yet. I know some people have, but yeah, I'd like to start working towards that definitely, certainly in the new year. But throughout the pandemic, it has been very much individual work. I have had a couple of dyad pieces working with parents, which I've really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed that kind of work. It's very challenging. And, I suppose it's that whole idea of working with the family, or working, with, in relation to reason for referral, kind of as many members as possible, coming into the therapeutic space, which has been wonderful. But largely it has been individual one-to-one sessions over the past year. Yeah, big time.
The dyadic work is gorgeous. It's really lovely that you're doing that.
Yeah.
And how do you find, that is in the space? Is it always the child initiates the parent coming in, or do you sometimes initiate the parent to come in for sessions, or how does that look?
Yeah, I guess the dyad work that I've done so far has been where I have been working with the child for a while. And it feels like the issue is still kind of presenting. So, for example, in relation to parent and child, there continues to be a little bit of a disconnect happening outside of session, that's not quite translating. So the work that we're doing in session is really, really positive, and there's a wonderful kind of learning for the individual themselves. But the specific reason for referral initially in that case that I'm thinking about, wasn't being addressed to the extent that it could have been. So I was very open to working in that way, supporting, parent and child in the space. So I offered that as a possibility at review time. And they were really open to it, thankfully. And so we all just kind of jumped on board and went for it for about 6 to 8 weeks again to see how it felt. We ended up continuing for a little bit longer as it was really benefiting the relationship, thankfully. And then we went back to some individual work again then to kind of go back to focusing on the child as well. So it was a beautiful piece of work. Yeah, really, really positive.
Lovely.
Yeah. And I think going forward, that dyad way of working is something that I'd like to kind of get into and I suppose further my experience with as well, because I find that, you're often working with the individual child for, a set number of weeks, and then you do a review with parents and you find that, there's so many things that can come up in reviews, that you haven't recognized or considered. And then in the considering, there's often, I wonder if mom or dad comes into the space for a little while, how might that shift? So there's certainly something really positive about kind of supporting that work as a child therapist in particular, I think, working with children. Teenagers, not so much. They might refrain from the idea of mom or dad. They're really coming into, this is my space. They're really looking at boundaries, and that can be really, really important for them. However, the little ones, because mom and dad are so important generally, or carer, or whoever they're being reared by, it's such a huge influential part of their lives. So yeah, it seems inevitable, really, doesn't it, to support that too.
It's beautiful to give it that healing space and time for them to just connect and play in the moment. It sounds really lovely.
Yeah.
When you have them in the room together, is there one particular material that you like to use most?
Generally, I would set up as many materials as possible in the space. So I do like to have as much variety in terms of sensory. I would I suppose there would be in the intake process a consideration of sensory issues, anything around materials that might be potentially triggering or too much or too little, or, and the reverse of that too, there might be a desire to work with those kind of materials. And so it would be really important that they're there. So I suppose in terms of material, it would be individual. It would be different for each child. I do tend to set up specific for each session, teenagers too, and adults. But I suppose in terms of, I generally would have as many materials as possible in general speaking terms. And then I guess whatever works for the individual, I would roll with that and work to support that going forward. Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. And I can tell that you're itching to get back into the group work then as well.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I suppose, I set up private practice in the middle of the pandemic, which is a very strange time to start in a lot of ways. It came with a lot of its own challenges, and some of it was difficult and some of it was actually easier in a lot of ways because there was such a demand for it. It was prime time for supports, where people could get it. So I did quite well very quickly, which was wonderful. It might not have been the case if it wasn't for the pandemic. But I suppose that group experience, and again, pros and cons to the online group work. So I would have set up a wonderful bereavement support group with a friend of mine and fellow arts therapist, Anna Shinners, who I think was on the show actually before.
Definitely, yeah.
Who's big into grief work and supporting people of all ages and working through their grief. And I suppose it's something that I always wanted to do in some capacity, support children and adolescents in particular, and working through their grief. And during the pandemic, it was inevitable, that people were there was no supports at all for children or adolescents or generally adults. Grief support groups were limited. People just weren't meeting up anymore. And so the online thing there was a really, really positive, thing to kind of grasp and kind of take advantage of, I suppose, and we kind of came together and we should do this and make this happen and see how it works. We didn't know how it was going to translate and would people be interested. It's a vulnerable topic, and and everybody is different in terms of how they approach their grief. For their children in particular, often support groups are like, oh, scary, and when there's kind of that resistance. So but actually it was the very fact that it was in the comfort of their own homes that I think it worked so well. There wasn't a going to a specific place. There was a certain I guess, intimacy and almost privacy around the experience of them generally setting up from their own rooms at home, their own bedrooms, and then coming together on this virtual realm and getting to see all of these other kids from all over the country who also are feeling the same kind of feelings at the same time. And there was just it really was one of the most rewarding pieces of work I've ever done. Anna would say the same, and we really want to do it again. But I suppose there's a couple of elements in terms of, people are zoomed out, I think, big time. People just are sick of it. So working towards it, the in-person groups would be great. But there was something special about the intimacy of it and the authenticity of it. And the very, very simple things of just being with other kids that were experiencing the same thing, was huge, was absolutely huge, and there was huge power and reward in that for everybody, I think, and they wanted to come back each week because they knew there wasn't pressure to be anywhere or go anywhere, but yet they could still sit with others who were kind of feeling the same kind of things at the same time and supporting each other in some way, and then never meeting in real life. So there's a strangeness about it, but a beauty in it at the same time. Yeah,
I never thought of it that way. Like, yes, this connection part is so important, but the other part of it of actually, I don't need to meet this person down in the local, shop or whatever, because it's not
yeah,
in my area. It's quite nice, actually, especially with grief work. You don't want
yes,
to be triggered like that by just seeing somebody from your group. So that's actually a really interesting way of looking at it too. I love that you brought up authentic, like the authenticity of it. I think that's just something that as art therapists, I think, and creative arts therapists, that we strive for, to have that authentic moment with somebody, in our space, in our sessions. And I suppose for me, like thinking about that, it's just about knowing yourself, So I suppose I'm curious to know your journey to becoming an art therapist and how that was to become your authentic self, your therapist self, and just that like origin story, I suppose, of where this all came about for you.
sure. God, it's a big question actually, because I guess it's something that's just kind of been building my whole life in so many different ways. And, I must say I'm very grateful to finally be here, to be finally doing what I've always wanted to do, whether or not I knew that this is what I wanted to do or not. In a literal sense, I think I'm finally at a place where I feel fulfilled in my work, hugely. And I'm very, very grateful for that. I guess, I suppose I would have always been creative to some extent. I would have naturally gone to art making as a child. I have lots of memories of drawing on walls and getting in trouble for, optimistic making things. And, I suppose I always was making little books and had little journals. And, from a very young age, I would have used art making as a way to kind of understand the world, I suppose. So I guess there's that innate understanding initially of the magic of it and the value of it. And then I suppose over time, I would have progressed along with my life. So, unfortunately, I lost my dad very suddenly when I was 5 years old to a heart attack. And, I would have used, there's so much, in that, but, and I think, I think the time that we were living in as well, back to the 90s, like it was definitely a very difficult time to be grieving as a child. I think nowadays we've come a lot farther in terms of our knowledge and understanding about being honest with kids, being open, communicating, etc. There very much wasn't that at the time. And so I suppose it was my way of understanding. The art making was my way of figuring out what was going on, where was he, what had happened, and just kind of releasing and expressing my feelings and anxieties and worries about it all. And I just found it very, very useful and supportive. And so I continued to do that, unknowns to myself. I always had a journal or a diary from there on. When I say journal or diary, I would be combining like art making, drawing, painting different materials with words as well. So I'd be, just kind of accumulating thoughts and things like that. I would have liked writing as well, naturally. So it would have been kind of a combination of both for years. And then coming into my adolescence, I suppose, the art making was something that I really enjoyed in school. And I suppose I was quite good at it. So I really nourished that, because it just made me feel good. It made me feel happy. I would have put a lot of my energy into art class as opposed to other subjects. And didn't like maths, and didn't like any other subjects really, to be totally honest. It would have been great if I just did art every day for my whole life, but I suppose there's the reality of that. But I suppose it just would have been that, where I came alive and where I felt well in myself. And so with other kind of unfortunate events that came along, lots of loss, lots of grief throughout my life, hence the love for the grief work now. I think, that kind of genuine experience of loss. As a teenager, I lost my cousin suddenly to suicide. That was very, very difficult. I was 14, and so a difficult age anyway. And again, art and music, I have to say, would have been a really important part of that too. Hence why I think I incorporate so much of the arts in general into my art, my therapeutic work, because I see the value in all of it. It's like Kathy Malchiodi, the art therapist, who really kind of has focused on the creative arts, the collective of all of the elements, that body-based way of working and communicating. That's where I feel I belong. It's like, yeah, that makes sense to me, because that's what worked for me, So yeah, I suppose I would have wrote some songs and would have used music a little bit in combination to painting. Photography I was starting to get into as well, a little bit purely experimentally. And then I went to art college. So when I went to art college, I got to just really explore all of the elements of, what I was kind of doing little bits of my whole life. And I did sculpture in combined media.
Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah, so I got to do a little bit of everything. You could do anything. It was the perfect discipline for me, because it combined all of the mediums into one. So there was photography, was kind of videography. I would have experimented with a little bit too. You could do your drawing, your painting, and then photography. And I suppose is where an installation is where I kind of went to going towards my degree. And again, it's so funny because in our college, all of my artwork was about my life. It was about my dad. It was about loss. It was about, finding myself. Inevitably, all art is, isn't it? It's just about you. And it very much was just about me. And it was very vulnerable. It was something I found difficult to present. It was something that I felt very, very protective of. And I know we all did, artists, showcasing, it's a massive, brave thing to do, to show and express, to the world your artwork in whatever medium. It's a beautiful, brave thing to do. I wasn't quite brave enough. So I suppose I kind of knew, the art therapy was something that kind of felt a little bit more for me. While I was in college, I would have worked a lot in the community. I would have worked a lot with children. I would have volunteered a lot in different disability services, doing art workshops, creative, using the arts, as a kind of a therapeutic activity, I guess, initially. And I just loved it. That's where I felt truly at home. It wasn't the showcasing of my artwork. It was that really took me. And so I suppose I had, in addition to that, also experienced quite a bit of therapy throughout my life. Not art therapy, but just personal generalized therapy. I suppose when I was a child, it would have been play therapy, I guess. Yeah. I remember there was toys in the room, and there was art materials as well, which I went for, of course. But yeah, and then as a teenager, it would have been general talking therapy, so it's generalized psychotherapy. And I found that really useful too. I really found talking and just being, figuring stuff out for myself, in addition to what I was doing for myself personally, really, really beneficial and important. So I suppose I valued therapy anyway, always, all of my life. And then I was also kind of enjoying what was happening in the community-based work. And then, I always had my art medium. Now, having said that, like I don't spend enough time on my artwork nowadays anymore. It just doesn't happen. It's all about the art. It's all about the work for me right now. It's all about the therapeutic work for me right now, and trying to balance self-care with work and a bit of a personal life, if possible, if at all, and time with family and things like that. So it's hard to get it all in, I suppose. I'd like to have more time for that, actually. But I suppose that's the reality of life, isn't it? And as time goes by, and I often think about it like it's something that I'm offering to my clients every day. It's like, let's use art making, let's use the arts to nourish ourselves and figure ourselves out, and love ourselves, and grow and change whatever it is that we need to change, and challenge ourselves. And then I'm not doing enough of it myself. And I feel like a little bit of I would have done all of my life, but I think now I'm not doing it enough. So it's certainly something that I probably need to look at. But yeah, anyway.
I hear you on that. Just to come in there and say that, because of the pandemic as well, like you're probably hitting the ground running here with your private practice, so it is about trying to find your footing and find that flow, and then bringing in that lovely bit of that warm breeze that that creativity can bring to you, and have that thing that actually sets you sail, like you have to find the wind in your sails. And I think for you've already done that before. It's just about giving yourself that time again, and I'm sure it will come for sure. But yeah, it's thank you so much for sharing your journey, because it's you're laying a lot out there, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. It's so lovely to hear you. Your story is just gorgeous, and all that, like you are so brave. You said there that like I wasn't so brave, in art college, but you are, because you're doing the work from a very young age, and probably a lot more than your peers in college. You've probably done a lot more soul searching, whereas a lot of people might get caught up in the concepts of art making, rather than the actual putting myself out there kind of part, so I think you're brave in a different kind of way, yeah, definitely. So yeah, just I suppose for me at the moment, I've found that the only way I can get that creative flow is by moving, and that can be in small moments, and like you're saying, music, you're writing songs and everything before, like it doesn't need to be this, doesn't it? It doesn't need to be this grand, I'm setting out this time for me. It can be just like an hour date with yourself once a week.
I love that. The
You
date.
know,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. It's so
absolutely.
important. And
Mhm.
because of the work that we do, it's actually, we can't not do that, to some extent, however it is, that we do it. You say the movement is something that works for you now. It's whatever it is that works for you, isn't it? It's not just because we're art therapists, doesn't mean that we're always doing loads of art to nourish ourselves. We do lots of other things too, that we see value in, and that's important for us. So yeah, and a date with yourself as well. I love that. Yeah, yeah. It's so important to carve out time for ourselves as therapists, because we're just not going to be able to be there for others, for our clients, if we're not there for ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly. And like even your Instagram yesterday, you're putting up like, what song makes you dance, and I'm just
Oh
like,
yeah.
yes, Joanne, that's it, because I'm like all about
Oh
moving
yeah, I love
in my
that.
kitchen. So I actually
Yeah.
suggested a song, David Bowie, Let's Dance. I played that song thanks to you for reminding me that
Oh,
I love to dance to that song. So I was like dancing in my kitchen with my dog, and it was great. So,
oh, that sounds gorgeous. Oh, I love to hear that.
but it's only like 4 minutes, and you're inviting people there, like, so it's just like, even those 4 minutes can do so much for you in your day, just to shift or just shake something off you. And
Yeah.
really important. Yeah.
And even just on that, like in between sessions as well, because it is quite hectic. I'm sure you're the same, Vicky. Sometimes, the reality is it's session kind of after session after session, just in terms of getting to see everybody, in the week. So I find, just on that, when you mention music or movement in between sessions, I actually physically, I do a few stretches. And I do a little bit of, breathing, like just kind of throwing it out of myself, the energy that's kind of stuck in your body. It's like there's something wonderful and shifting about moving it out of your body, isn't there, in order to kind of come back then to a place of, okay, calm, ready. Yeah. And it's just a couple of minutes. That's all it is. That's all it is. But it's really shifting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just moving it out. And I suppose, like, your journey is individual to you, but I'm sure a lot of listeners probably would be picking up on things, going, oh, that was me. I was that child who just went into my world, in my sketchbook, and found
Yeah.
myself. Oh, that's me. And really has maybe forgotten that that was the case. Sometimes we forget just how playful and brave we were as children, and maybe we, little by little lost that part of ourselves. And it's just to remind ourselves that no, she's still there, he's still there, we're still here.
And that's the work that I tend to do with adults. Do you find that a lot of it is going back to that inner child work? It's kind of rediscovering the things that you used to use to nourish yourself. And that's the art making, I think, is an innate way of communicating and playing for all human beings. I really do believe that to be true, regardless of how society has kind of formulated this idea that no, you have to be good at art in order to use art to support yourself, or even just fun. There's kind of this dismissing of it because I'm not good, or I don't have technique or skill. But you can always break that, and when you do, it's just so wonderful, because it's like, yes, there you go, and it's not, it's natural. It's not a big realization. Generally, it's kind of like oh yeah, I remember that. That was really useful, that creativity in whatever form. Yeah, it's amazing. Now, speaking of adults work, I don't have many adults right now. I don't know what it is about me. I think it's the children are just coming to me, and I love it. I absolutely love working with children and adolescents. I absolutely love the work. I would like to work with adults a little bit more, and maybe that'll come with time too. But I've had maybe 2 or 3 adult clients over the year, and it's been beautiful work. It really has been very very positive work, and I'd like to continue to do some more of that, perhaps in the group setting as well, now that we're kind of coming into, the considering groups and setting up groups, in person again. I'd love to do some more of that. I have done a bit of training with somebody in a therapist based in my hometown in Tipperary, where she has asked me to come and kind of share art therapy as to fellow psychotherapists who want to kind of focus on working specifically with little ones and adolescents within their work, particularly adolescents, for that specific group. And it's funny because I haven't actually been able to meet yet. It's all been online again. It's been the online experience, which has been wonderful. And very kind of engaging, I have to say. The engagement, considering the limitations of the online platform, has been very, surprising, actually. I didn't expect it to be such a positive, creative experience in addition to the learning. But I'm really hoping now, coming into the new year, that we'll be able to meet in person and actually carry out groups, art therapy, experiential groups. So that's something I'm really excited about as well, I think, in that kind of, working with people who are also working with people, supporting people, and how the art making can actually be beneficial in supporting yourself first, and then supporting clients as well, how it can be used in the therapeutic space for somebody who doesn't have that, art therapy training or an arts therapy background.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's great that you were invited to do that as well, because it is an extra thing on top of just the talk therapy. It is an extra thing that they can do, and I think, why not? It's gorgeous to be able to do it.
There's so much value, and it's such a, even at the simplest form, it can be a way in sometimes, particularly working with the adolescents, the very, very resistant adolescent client that comes in and does not want to be there at all. The art making can be just a lovely, gentle way in. And it's slow. It's a slower process in many ways, but then in other ways, it's quick. A lot happens within that too. That doesn't happen with just language sometimes. And it's not to dismiss. I hate to dismiss the value of language, because language is beautiful and so important for us. But there's so much, there's so many other ways of communicating. And art is my favorite language. I think I put up a post recently on Instagram. Art is my favorite language. I just really like it, because it's like, it really is. It's my favorite.
It's so true. Thank you so much. I guess I'm looking at you, and I'm just saying how lucky it is for your clients to be with you, because you exude this like passion and for the work that you're doing, and it really comes out. And I'd say anyone who comes to you would just be really happy to be in your presence. Yeah,
it's actually beautiful. Thank you.
It's lovely to see that passion, and connecting with you it's always nice, even on Instagram. It's always a pleasant
Instagram. Yeah, it's funny. It's a whole other thing, isn't it? The social media aspect of being a therapist, because it's like you're trying to kind of reach out to people that you're never going to meet, really, and support them in some way or influence their day in some very subtle way. And you just don't know whether or not you're doing that. So you just kind of continue to do it in the hope that it reaches somebody somewhere or benefits somebody somewhere. It's a strange, yeah, it's a strange world.
Well, I think once you connect with one, that's all that, like, that then you've won, like, so
Yeah, I think so.
one person sees it, then you've won. So what is your Instagram handle and how can people find you?
So I'm Art Therapy with Joanne. That's my kind of business title, I suppose. Very, very straightforward and to the point. Art Therapy with Joanne on Instagram, same on Facebook. And website is arttherapywithjoanne.ie. Yeah, so it's hopefully memorable.
Absolutely, it is.
To the point.
Yeah, it's a brilliant way of inviting people in as well. It's like, oh, art therapy with Joanne. Yes, okay, yes.
That's what we're going to be doing. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think just in addition to that, I do work with people, with autistic people of all ages. So the autistic community would be a big part of the work that I do, and I'm very passionate about. And I think it was kind of really the decision of the art therapy with Joanne was because it's so literal. It's like that's what you're going to be doing, and that's who she is. So I think it was kind of coming from that autistic kind of literal sense that it was inclusive and kind of everybody could get it, and it's it's like you have a beautiful title for your name, and there's so many gorgeous names, and the name it can be such an important thing, isn't it? It's like it's kind of what is the core, what is the energy of what you do. And I played around with lots of different names, like ridiculous names and really fancy names, and none of them felt right, so it just kind of ended up becoming quite literally Art Therapy with Joanne. Yeah, it makes sense. So yeah, so
It's lovely to think, I suppose, like that. We have to think of our clients and looking for everybody's inclusion, so it's lovely to even think of that in the title. Like, just says a lot about you. It's lovely. So we have your website, which is gorgeous. I was on it today and it's really nice and clear. And some lovely images up there, so it's really nice for anyone to go check out. And that's the great thing, is you can just go on and have a nose and just have a look and see what you like, and you can get in touch with Joanne there, and also through the ICAT website as well. You're on there because you're an accredited therapist with ICAT. And the AGM is coming up soon, so I might get to see you on the online platform probably. Yeah.
Absolutely, it will be online. Yeah, it will. I won't be able to make it in person, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely, I'm looking forward to that. Actually, that'll be great. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Joanne O'Dwyer, for coming in today. And you're recently married. Did you change your name, or are you?
Not at all. Will you stop? No way. I'm a terror like that. No. I'm Joanne O'Dwyer.
Congratulations on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much, Vicky.
Thank you so much for coming on.